Sumner, where are you going to sit? You may want to watch my show. Okay, get in there. Okay, have you started yet? Push.
Okay, I'll push it right now. Okay.
The mathematics we had.
Okay, is it going?
Yes, it's going.
Okay, welcome one and all. So quiet down class. We hope if you're chewing gum, I hope you brought enough for everybody.
Oh, yes.
Okay? So quiet down, welcome to Frank. Get yourself, just blend in. It's a pleasure to welcome you here on September 30th, 2013. We have a special guest, to my way of thinking, that being DeeDee Halleck. DeeDee Halleck is the mother of public access maven extraordinary. So we're very happy to welcome her to talk about past, present, and future of public access television in particular. She's got a lot to say, so let's give her a good welcome, and thank you very, very much.
I'm so overwhelmed just hearing some of the stories from some of the people who are here. This is a very distinguished and accomplished crowd. I salute Gloria, who has been such a pioneer at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and before that at EBC and Harold, so many years, and Beth, it's amazing, and Sumner, who was working on a whole other level. Amazing people here. It's really an honor to be asked to tell you guys anything. You know more than I do, so I hope we can learn from each other. But I'm very concerned, having spent so much of my life trying to promote public access, which I feel is such an important, especially tonight. The government is closing down. You know? What is going on? I'm glad. You know? But it's like we are in a terrible shape, this country, and we have a lot of work to do. And I feel it's so important, the media and public access is one of the only voices we have that can tell it like it is, and it's very important that we keep it. And we are so lucky in New York City to have Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and we wouldn't have it because, I mean, with all due respect to Jim Schladak and his many years of running EBC, the cameras were terrible, right? And, and it was very difficult to work with the guy. But we had Paper Tiger, which was the organization that I founded in 1981, met together with Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, FAIR, you know, Jeff Cohen, and right now Jim Norekas and Janine Jackson. We worked with them to actually create what we called the Citizens Committee for Responsible Media, NICRM. And that was because we felt, how could New York City, Manhattan, keep going without having a real media center? And we went and we marched in front of City Council. We marched in front of Manhattan Cable. We marched and made papier-mâché TV sets and papier-mâché cameras and tried to say that this is important and to get public attention to it. And finally, luckily, we had the borough president, Ruth Messenger. And I think the key event was there was a very good public access on Staten Island. Tricia Dare was running it. And for whatever reason, they were able to do it out on Staten Island. And so we took Ruth Messenger out on the ferry boat to Staten Island to visit the public access out there. And when she saw that, she understood, because it's very hard to explain to people what public access is if you don't understand it, or if you listen to what the mass media says about it, which always says it's just the crazies running it, it's like Vanity Video, or what's his name, the guy who takes off his clothes, George, Ugly George, you know, that's the way mass media wants us to think about public access. But when Ruth Messenger saw that, she came back and she went to work, and she really helped develop M&N. And we have an opportunity now to make M&N better, because we have a new borough president. Hopefully we will get a new borough president. There'll be an election, and I think we have an opportunity, and we can, what I'm hoping is we can get together and think about how to improve M&N, because M&N has, we don't know what the budget was for 2012, but the budget for 2011 was $10 million. $10 million. Now, that money could have been spent in a better way, and we're saying we don't even know how that money is spent. We want transparency. We want to take part to make it more participative. The way it's set up on the bylaws is there are supposed to be, it said a third of the board is supposed to be current public access producers. That is not the case. That is not the case now. It says that the board of directors is supposed to reflect the racial and the ethnic and the geographic representation of the city. It does not do that. There's not one Asian on the board.
They've never had.
They've never. Well, they had C.T. Louis was there for a while.
No, I mean
it's never reflected properly.
And it's never had, except I think Harold.
No, there was director Sue Lee. There was a Chinese director a couple of years ago.
She wasn't a director. She was.
This is the board of directors, not the people who are using the studio.
Yeah.
So, so the question is, how can we sort of hold their feet to the fire and make them be true to their bylaws and really participate in the public meetings? Now, the board meetings are supposed to be open to the public. I've been in touch with a guy, Robert Friedman, who is he's the head of the New York State Office on Open Meetings. And he sent me, he has actually litigated two cases of public access. One in Kingston, New York, where they actually had to make it open. But he said that the case law is there, and we have the right. So when we showed, M&M tried to, the board, I'm going to need some water. Maybe you
can get water.
I have a terrible cold, but thank you. But when we went, the first time a group of us, Betty Yu, Denise, I'm forgetting her last name, but Jen Wager, a number of people who knew what was going on at M&N and wanted to make it better. We tried to go to the board meeting, and we were not allowed in. But then we got an opinion from this guy in Albany, and we showed it to them, and then they had to let us in. So you can go to the board meeting. So I hope some of you will think seriously about finding out when the next board meeting is. That's the problem, is they don't like to tell you when it is. Yes, Gloria.
Generally, it used to be the first Tuesday of every month, but also when they have allowed us in, because at certain points we were able to get in, they would let us in for 5 minutes and then they'd say, okay, out. What? You're going into private meetings.
Could I make one point? If you talk, please, we're just recording the audio for some reason on the tape is there, but on the
okay,
I'll repeat that. Try and speak up.
Yes, speak loud.
Yeah, because the
Oh, also, you've lost your mic. The microphone is way down there.
Oh, sorry.
The what?
I don't have a pin or a little one of those.
No,
clips.
she's recording that herself. But that's, if you speak up, try and speak up.
You want me to sit close
That
to
is the
Harold?
wireless, hi,
Oh, that's yours.
That's the wireless mic,
yeah.
and it's a mic. I mean, if you
Harold,
have
is
it
this
way
going
down
on?
there, it's not going to help you much.
Yeah, I just brought it up.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Uh,
Anyway,
Speak up if you're going to talk.
Well, do you have a
loud.
clip that we can clip the mic to DeeDee's
or even
lapel
a
with?
safety pin.
There are two things
Just a clip for the mic?
that
Yes,
should be mentioned about the board meeting.
Oh,
Queens Public Access TV never has producers at their board meetings. However, you have Association of Certified Access Producers that seem to have disappeared. And secondly, what happened with Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman? Shouldn't she have been involved in these things?
is she involved in
Okay,
this?
okay, thanks. Thanks.
I think we have to get it to a certain level so that we can actually bring, I think she would cover it if we can. What I think needs to be, we need to form some kind of a committee. And I think the first step would be going to, if we get a new borough president, to go to the borough president and ask questions about it. I don't know how many of you saw, I sent out a notice, I don't think everyone got it, but I think there are many issues. The whole issue of transparency is one of the issues. The whole issue of the commercialization of the studios, because now the studios are actually being rented out. And there's a kind of double standard in that if you are a local community producer coming in through public access, what happens if you're 10 minutes overtime? You get docked, right? You can't use the studio.
Yeah.
The commercial producers can be 2 hours late and no one's giving them any questions. And they also get expert help. They get the best cameras, and they can make their schedules at any time. It's contradictory because how much money are they actually gaining from that commercial sales? Now, Nan Rubin was on the board. She's now moved to New Mexico. But she said that the total for 1 year was $7,000 of commercial. That's total. But how much money is M&N getting from the public? The monies that are part of the franchise fees should be public monies. So that's $10 million. Now, who should be the privileged group that uses the station? It should not be whoever these commercial Butterfly News or whatever it is using it. So that's one question. So we have transparency, accountability, we have the commercialization. We also just have the whole technology, because the technology, there have been so many problems lately, and they can't even get the aspect ratio right. Sometimes people's faces are squeezed, sometimes they're wide. Gloria knows very well.
We're still putting our stuff out 3x4 analog. And before we had supposedly HD, we were doing at least anamorphic, which is 16:9.
Yeah.
But now they cannot do it. And I think it's definitely possible. It's just they don't have anyone who has the knowledge or the inclination to check on it.
See, with the amount of money they have of $10 million a year, they should be able to have much better time. And there's just not that kind of overview that should happen. And this is something that the board of directors should know. And because I brought up a lot of these issues, I've been banned. I've been banned. I can't use the studio. I can't put a tape in. I can't go even to the board meeting. I went to the board meeting 2 weeks ago, and they wouldn't let me in. So I had to stay outside. Now they said that the reason I was banned was because I was threatening one of the staff members. what the offending problem was that one of my good friends, and he was unable to be here tonight, is Papalero Melendez, who's a Puerto Rican poet. He's considered like the kind of mayor of East Harlem. If you walk down the street with him, it's amazing. Everyone knows him. He plays the king in the Three Kings Day parade. He's loved and a kind of mythic figure for the whole community. He was so excited when they were going to have the Barrio Firehouse. And he kept telling me, DeeDee, it's going to be great. It's right in my neighborhood. It's 3 blocks from me. I'll be able to make TV.
Let him in.
What?
They wouldn't let him in.
And what happened is, because he was part of our group that tried to go to the board meeting, he was told that he couldn't be part. He was in a kind of leadership class there. They kicked him out of the leadership class, which was this tremendous blow to him. Because first of all, they were using his image to promote the firehouse, because he had done a class at Union Settlement, and he worked with, it was an amazing class because it was a mixture of seniors and teenagers. And they took video of it, which was very impressive, because here is this poet teaching video to all these older people and young people together.
What hypocrisy on their part.
And they use that picture, and it's still, occasionally I'll see it on MNN running, is Papo teaching these classes. And then once he gets there, he's not allowed in. Now the youth channel people feel the same way. The word that one of them used to me was, she felt like she was being pimped, because when they wanted to get the franchise, they took these kids around to meet with the city council people, to all the different politicians, and show how lively and how cool these young people were. And as soon as they got the franchise, they basically decimated the youth channel. There's no youth channel. They have a couple of people there, but they used to have a staff of 13. A staff! Plus they had dozens of young people that came in and were making programs. You don't see them around the studio anymore.
No, the entire facility has been emptied. The youth channel facility. They say it's moved up to Harlem, but I don't know.
I think they had one summer program, summer before last, but I don't even think they had a big summer program this summer. But anyway, the anger that Papo felt, and so so the two of us decided they were going to have the official opening of the Barrio Firehouse. So Papaleto and I went, and I videotaped him. And he was so angry. He says, I can't get in. I'm going to have to wait until they die, or they can hire somebody else, or someone shoots them. And then I'll be able to get on TV. Now, that is what Dan Coughlin said, that by saying someone shoots them, that was censored, that was a threat to the staff people. And so I said, I was banned for 3 months for doing that. I didn't say it, but I videotaped it, but they cut out that. And I mean, they wouldn't run the way it works at MNN is you give a tape and they have to run it without looking at it. And they ran it. And then, but they wouldn't do a rerun, and they said from then on I was banned for 3 months. So I said, okay, I will change it, and I'll censor that part if that's the offending part. So I put a big block up, and I said, censored by MNN over that part. And so I said, oh great, now I can make my series. I have so many tapes I want to run. I mean, For example, I've done so many tapes over the years. Like there's all this talk about Bill de Blasio in Nicaragua. I did a film called U.S. Citizens in Nicaragua, Waiting for the Invasion, in 1983. I would love, it's a half-hour long, I would love to run that tape on MNN, but because I'm banned, I can't do that. So,
Question.
yes.
Can someone else run it?
No, they said anything by me, anything that has my name. I will not run. And my name is on so many tapes because I've helped so many people make tapes. So I don't know. You know, it'd be interesting to see whether they'll. I'm sure they won't run this. But let me just say, to finish. So I said I did. They called. Jeanette called me and said, "You're banned for a year." What? And I got a letter from Dan Coughlin saying I was banned for a year. And so I called up and I said, why am I banned? Because I censored that part that you said was the bad part. And they said, yeah, but it's still running on YouTube. And I said, you have jurisdiction over YouTube? I get banned for something that I'm running on YouTube? So, I mean, it's really nuts. So I am hopefully going to take my, I mean, I believe, I'm not used to fighting for myself. I'm usually working for different organizations. But I think in this case where I've been personally banned, and Papoletto has been banned, he has been banned forever. They sent him a letter saying he was banned. He can never come back to Indy.
His firehouse.
They have done that with a number of people, and some of them they have taken back. I think Frank was banned for a lifetime. There's one other person, Bill Presley, is banned, and he's back. Okay?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to talk to see if they went to a lawyer or whatever, but I definitely want to fight this because I don't. But more than that, I feel really the most important thing is to try and get some organization together, like the one we had before, which is New York Citizens Committee for Responsible Media, to really look at MNN and see if there's not a way that the $10 million could be spent to really improve MNN, to get more young people involved. And there were all these grants that they had before. They would give away $250,000 every year to community groups like Asian Cinevision, Paper Tiger got some grants, DCTV, different community organizations would get $10,000, $15,000. That was initiated by Ruth Messenger, who felt that the whole geography of Manhattan and the way that different neighborhoods change, that it was very important that there be bases for media production that's not just on 59th Street at that point. There was just 59th Street. But that's why she felt that there should be ways of empowering local groups, which is why you would have like different welfare rights organizations and different groups would have access to be able to hire somebody to buy the videotape, to do the editing, to really follow through, to do teaching and facilitating to make video happen in the different communities. And certain Asian Cinevision, I talked to John Woo, he said it was so useful having that money. They got, I think, only like $7,000, but what he did with that money was put together little packages for MNN of the winners of the different Asian Film Festival, Asian American Film Festival, their different films that they had shown. And they made a series, I think it's eight weeks long. But he said without that money, they're so busy with what they're doing, this enabled them to really look at their whole output and their archive, and it helped them to actually preserve films that would have been lost. Now that money, those grants are not there anymore. So how can we reinstate those grants? Because when I asked about it, they said, oh, well, none of the programs were any good. Now, Betty Yu said that and also they said the same thing about the Youth Channel, and she said that there was an assessment done, and they said that the grants were some of the best programming that had been made at M&N, and that Youth Channel was some of the best programming. And somehow that got distorted when the current administration talks about it. It says, oh, those were terrible films. We want more professional. And that's what they're doing, is they are hiring. Now, Gloria called me and asked me that there was an ad for a director, and she thought it was the overall ED of the organization. No, they are looking to hire the movie directors, and they're putting ads out in. They're not going to the public access community. They don't even go to the meetings of the Alliance for Community Media. They sent Zenaida. She was on one panel. I didn't see her at any of the other panels. They had one person. When Betty Yu was there, they had like 28 people go to those conferences.
I was going to ask you about that. What is the state of the Alliance? The Alliance for Community Media had an office in Washington. They were representing the nationwide aspect of public access, rather than concentrating in New York. That's well enough. But what's the status of the Alliance? And there was at the beginning something close to 3,000 places across the country that were relating to the Sloan Commission and all that sort of thing. What's the state of the Alliance now in terms of media lobbying or media influence or standards or anything like that, in your estimation?
Well, I think that I had a long talk with Barbara Popovic about this.
Okay.
She's the head of Chicago Public Access. And it's a wonderful public access. And I asked her if she had ever banned anyone, and she said no, they made somebody go on at late at night because they were taking off all their clothes or something like that. But she said she's never, and she said there was someone who spent his whole show was about how terrible Chicago Access was. But they were so nice to him, and he loved it so much that he changed his message to how much he liked the Chicago Public Access. But what she said about the Alliance is that the Alliance is in trouble, as you know, public access. But it depends, because like Philadelphia just got access like 2-3 years ago, and they're doing really well there. Okay. And there are other organizations that have fought the fight, and we're still there. Like Tucson is still very active, and Portland and Seattle. But the question is, one of the things that M&N should be, because it gets so much more than any other access station, it should be the flagship for the whole national community.
Yes.
And it's not. I mean, there is an organization, the Alliance for Media Democracy or something, which is sort of their lobbying arm. They have a lobbying arm.
Yeah, they're in Washington.
And they're in Washington. And she said, Barbara Popovic is very active in that.
Okay.
And she said she feels they're doing a good job, and that actually people, they've done polls and things, and people do respond very positively when the general public totally supports public access. And for the cable companies to say that people don't want public access is a lie. And in fact, when they had in city council, one of the most powerful speakers to endorse public access was a guy who was one of these salesmen who go around to different big apartment buildings and try to get people hooked up. And he said that they told him, his boss told him to tell people, because they're competing with the direct broadcast satellite. So he said, tell them that they have to get Time Warner, otherwise they won't get public access. And Time Warner knew that that was a selling point, and they told their salesmen to use that because they know that the direct satellite doesn't offer public access.
I don't want to go off on this, but do they have any standards that, like we have federal law, and we have state law, we have local law, we have local robber barons. Are there any principles that have been sort of characteristic of access from the beginning that are codified or have any meaning in terms of overseeing the whole national development in the interest of the producers that you're aware of?
No, but
were you just at a
Harold,
DeeDee, were you at a recent meeting of the Alliance? Did I hear you say that?
I was, when was the last time? I didn't go to the one, did I go? I think, yeah, I went to the one this summer, yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was in San Francisco, actually. It was very interesting because it was together with the radio group, which is the NFCB, National Federation of Community Broadcasters.
But do they have any national standards that could be...
No, that's what I was just going to say.
Getting at, you know?
When Nick Johnson was on the FCC, he pushed a national law that there had to be public access, and that there were certain standards that cable companies had to have. I believe it was under Nixon or maybe Reagan that they dissolved that. So it went back to the local communities to make their own laws. So the laws now, that there are state laws, and there are also the cities make the franchise.
With due respect, Nicholas was part of the Federal Reserve for Federal Communications Commission, along with Richard Wyatt.
And Nick
but I'm talking
Johnson,
about the Alliance itself, which was an organization to be in the interest of the public access system. There's 3,000 of them across the country. So there is an overarching kind of understanding that, standards and kind of things that could have been developed by the Alliance would represent the representatives of the public access system writ large, and it's even going global now. So that's what I was getting at.
Well, there was some hope briefly when they were having these hearings around the country, particularly about the FCC had hearings, and COPS, commissioner, there was a Commissioner COPS, C-O-P-P-S, who, I forget his first name, what was his first name? He's a really nice guy, and he spoke at the Media and Democracy conferences, and he was very supportive of public access. And he was, for a very short time, the actual, the head cheese at the FCC. But then there was a new guy appointed by Obama that is worse than any of the Republican appointees. Yes.
If you can we get access to the franchise agreement? Because I was wondering, originally, the studio could not do political programming, and now the studio is doing a lot of its own political programming, and they're supporting certain groups, certain politicians, not all politicians. They're not open to all people, just whoever they prefer. But I thought that the original franchise did not approve of that.
I am sure that's, I mean, the original franchise is out because there was a new franchise that was negotiated between Dan Coughlin. Actually, Zenaida is a Democratic Party person who was actually hired to actually negotiate the franchise. When they thought it would just take 1 year, it actually took 5 years to negotiate the franchise. So meanwhile, she stayed on, and now she's become an executive producer or something. But she was an aide to Dinkins in the past. She's had a lot of very liaison with the Democratic Party.
DeeDee,
So I don't know what that means in terms of the programming that they've decided on, but yes, Beth.
I have a question. I heard FCC mentioned, but did they ever, cops or any of those persons that you mentioned, did they ever say that we have jurisdiction here? And in the interest of fairness and the public's right to know, there should be some standard, some regulation. Has that conversation ever taken place at any level?
Good question.
Very good question, and that's why, actually, the buck stops at the borough president's office. So if we have problems with that, for right now, I mean, in lieu of a national regulations, which we don't have, but we could.
But there ought to be.
And we have, the woman who won the Democratic is, I'm forgetting her name, but Gail Brewer. If she wins, I think she would be a good person to try to discuss the issues of
Gail has her own show.
she's been on public access.
Right, well, M&N runs her show for her, as they do for many other political figures.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if the present borough president also has a show. Now,
Scott Stringer.
Scott Stringer.
Yeah.
Now, aren't they supposed to get their shows on the other paid channels?
On the other page.
Yes, there are other public access channels.
You mean in Brooklyn or?
No, they're part of the, well, they're in Manhattan, I assume they're in all.
Oh, the RNN or whatever. Yeah.
No, not RC, M&N goes on RCN, Time Warner Cable, and Verizon Finals.
Yeah.
But in addition to the 4 channels we have, there are a number of other channels which Bloomberg is always on, and which Giuliani.
Well, we lost NYC. See, we should have fought for WNYC.
That's what I'm talking
And
about.
Bloomberg gave it away.
But there's government access.
Giuliani gave it away, actually.
Yes, the racetrack.
Yes, and that was the people's channel. That was the city channel. And we do not have that anymore. And that was also not just, it was a UHF channel, so you could get it without paying anything to Time Warner. But nowadays, it's so hard to get the digital channel. But
Well, I think management, we're no longer Manhattan Community, Manhattan Neighborhood Network. They refer to themselves as Manhattan Community Access. As a matter of fact, the word public access has been eliminated from all the top networks. Like anything put out, it's now referred to as community access.
well,
It's what?
community, Gloria says that there have been some changes.
That happened a long time ago.
Well, I just,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder what that means.
The paychecks are made out for Manhattan Community Access now.
Well, the other problem, I just to go back to my list of some of the problems, and that is the whole question of paying staff under the table. Now, that has really, I think, distorted the whole space, and part of it is that the staff that's there is so demoralized, and because their salaries are so much lower, there's a layer of executives that are getting very high salaries. If you look, the ED is making more than $250,000. Now that is 3 times what the last ED made, 3 times. So there's an amplification of executive privilege, and it also includes all kinds of perks, and that was never the case before, and certainly that must be 3 times what any other public access makes in this country. Now, my daughter works for the Bronx Defenders, and when I questioned some of this to some of the board members, they said, oh, well, we're dealing with $10 million a year, so we need, there's sort of executive levels that have to be kept. And my daughter works for the Bronx Defenders. They have a budget of $20 million a year. Their ED makes $120, which is less than half of what the ED of Manhattan Neighborhood Network makes. So, and she's dealing with 20 million, not 10 million. So, it's and she's a lawyer. I mean, you know, and it's just it seems like there's a level of and when you have that kind of 1% and 99%. There, it builds up resentment. So what I've seen in the staff there, and some of them I really love, and some of them have come up, you know, I've known for years, but they, if they're still making pretty much what they made 10 years ago, some of them have been there for 17 years.
They don't get raises.
They don't get raises.
Yeah.
And there's 3 or 4 executives. There's a financial director, there's Zenaida and Dan, and there's one other person who are making very high salaries. And that differential in salaries just breeds a kind of alienation, and so they're not going to help you. Why should they help you? So if somebody comes along and says, hey, if you'll help me make my show, I'll give you $50 or $20, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to be more interested in helping them out because you're still, and that is a big problem, and that is very easy to really oversee and stop. But there's, when I mentioned that to Dan, in my initial conversations, we were talking, he won't even talk to me now. He said, well, that's natural. We can't do anything about that. That's what he said. He said he appreciates it because it's somehow giving them salaries that he's not giving them, so it takes the burden off him on some level. So
has M&M gone private?
Well,
because I think Manhattan Community Access is a private corporation.
Well, see, that it is a private corporation, but it's a 501c3, which is why you can go to GuideStar, which is a website that will give you the income tax reports, and that's how we know what the salaries are. I mean, they are not issued at the end of the year. Chicago Public Access gives an annual report. It's a full color, it looks like a corporate report. It's a little fancy for my taste, but it's very above board, and it gives what the salaries are. It gives you a sense of how many staff there are, what they're getting paid, how much money goes to buy equipment. We don't have, and it's published once a year and handed out. There's stacks of it in the waiting room at Chicago Public. And they take it to Alliance for Community Media. Have you ever seen those annual reports?
Well, not that many, but that's
a lot of them do that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, Queens is now a corporation, Queens Public Communications Corporation. And they promoted the executive director into that position in charge.
Is that Mr. Goldberg?
No. Dan Leon.
Okay. Because there was a guy from Queens Access, Bob Goldberg.
Bob, yeah, I saw him the other day.
Yeah. He used to come to our paper tiger meetings.
Well, now they altered the status of it. Don't you make checks out to Queens Public Communications Corporation, not to Queens Public TV.
Well, Brooklyn did a very similar thing. They have this Brooklyn, I don't know, Arts Alliance or something, I don't know. But the guy who was at Brooklyn is now at M&M.
The guy, that particular guy told me that M&N was giving us the studio for free and not to complain.
And not to what?
Not to complain because I was getting the studio for free. And I said, no, you are getting my work for free.
Exactly.
I spend my money and my labor to produce public access, public advocacy programs for M&M. But that attitude is what seeps
It's
down.
very prevalent.
It's
yeah.
prevalent and it seeps down to the staff.
Yeah.
And that's what the staff tells that to the producers too.
Yeah.
And that should not be, because that's not propaganda.
Well, I think the staff is, as I said, they're alienated, they're disheartened, and I think that because I couldn't believe they're all sitting up in the room talking upstairs. I don't know what, I mean, when I was working with Harold in your show, they weren't there. And Josh was there, and we were having trouble. We couldn't even put a DVD on because they had changed the wiring in the studio. When they go around changing the wiring, they have to have somebody there to facilitate. I mean, what are the staff there for? They're to help you make your shows, I think. And instead, the attitude is, don't bother us, you know.
Exactly. Also, previously we had a professional engineer on staff. We haven't had one for years.
Well, what can we do about it? I really. And anybody else have any problems in it?
Yes, a lot of the staff is very rude. They try to sabotage the shows. I was helping a producer. She didn't get her mics until 10 minutes before the show was finished. She could not do her show. They said the mics were charging, but this should not have happened.
I don't know, I guess we need to, write letters or, a collective letter that we can.
Well, I think a collective letter, I think, first of all, meeting and really enumerating exactly what the problems are, I think would be helpful.
Yeah.
And then sending copies to the board and also to the borough president.
I tried to give something to the board, and they wouldn't accept it. And then I saw Chumley, and I tried to give it to him, and he wouldn't accept it either. So where is the fiduciary responsibility?
Oh my goodness.
Well, I have taught at NYU, and I actually. I wrote a letter. Well, I noticed that one of the new board members is Cheryl Antonio, who teaches at NYU. So I wrote her this kind of collegial letter saying, "Dear Professor Antonio, I also taught at NYU in cinema studies, and I've been very involved with public access." And she had just come on board, and she said, at the meet, I was out in the meeting where she was introduced, and she said, "Well, I'm really anxious to learn about public access because I don't know anything about it." Because she's never, and of course she's the perfect member of the board. But so she, so I said to her, in the hall, I said, well, I'll write to you, and because you said you'd like to learn. I said I've been involved with public access for 25, 30 years, and so I wrote her this long letter saying I'd like to meet with you. This is some of my history. I gave her some links to there's a very nice tape that Nickram did about why Manhattan needed public access that we used to show to the city council. And I got a letter back, which I have. It was on email, and she said, "Dear Professor Halleck, thank you." And I told her I taught at the University of California for 17 years, and television production, that's what I taught. And my students all did a public access show at Del Mar Cable, right outside of San Diego. And so I said, and I wrote her all this information, and then she wrote back, she said, oh, that sounds very interesting, I'd like to meet with you, but I have to first find out what the protocol is. So I waited and waited, and 2 weeks later I got a letter back, and she said, I've been informed by the director that there's to be no, that I cannot talk with the producers.
Most of them are not allowed to talk to.
But so what is the function of the board if not to find out?
Public access.
Is what?
To sell commercial time.
To sell commercials.
Public access? Ridiculous.
Get a lawyer.
So, I don't, you know, and one of the things that I did talk to the guy up at the open meeting office in Albany, who's very nice, by the way. If there's ever a meeting you want to attend, just call him up, because
Who is that?
his name is Robert Freeman.
And what's the organization?
It's called the New York State Office of Open Government.
Okay.
He's very nice, but I think it's him and his secretary. I don't think they have a big staff, but he's very concerned about making sure meetings are open. But one of the other questions, I tried to videotape the meeting, and they said we're not allowed to videotape. But some public access stations around the country, they videotape. It's on their channel. They have the meeting of the public access. Why not do that? Why not? And they won't do that. And so but he said that is part of the open meeting law, the regulations. It's not a law. I'm not sure exactly what the difference between regulations and laws are, but he said that we have to go to court. But we can force them not only to let us videotape, but also to have that public meetings are supposed to have input from the public. It's not just that you go and passively listen. There should be a designated time where the public has input. And the first thing they tell you when Paula, Gloria, and Joe went to the meeting 2 weeks ago, they said, oh, you can't say anything. You can't say a word.